Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed guests. Welcome back and hope you had enjoyed your lunch. This is Lama Arabiyat, the head of AI from the Ministry of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship. Now we are going to start a new conductive panel discussion with our esteemed panelists. To introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Lama, for the warm introduction. My name is Abdullah Biary. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for United Cooperative Assurance. Basically, I've led two separate departments, built it from scratch in the financial industry. And that's a little about me.
Welcome, Engineer Abdullah. Mr. Ricoh.
Hey, folks. My name is Ricoh Danielson, the CEO of First Responder. We're a cybersecurity incident response and digital forensics firm. We handle the biggest breaches and some of the biggest breaches in the world that are specifically newsworthy.
Welcome, Mr. Ricoh. Mr. AbdulRahman.
My name is Al-Nimar, VP Cybersecurity from Saudi Arabia. 25 years experience in both IT and cybersecurity.
Welcome, Mr. AbdulRahman. And Professor Tahar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tahar Kechadi. I'm Professor of Computer Science. My research area, I would say, is in data science with a specific focus on cybersecurity for the last 15 years.
Welcome all. We have a great experts here today and professionals in the cybersecurity field. We also have Mr. Glen, who's joining us online. He's with us. He will. Okay, we can proceed. Okay, we will start a panel about SaaS. We are going to cover the most important topic in this regard, the current cloud security challenges, the implementing processes and platforms to keep data secure, and identifying potential threats and taking actions to prevent these threats. We will start our discussion with first question to Professor Tahar. From your experience, what do you think about compliance and forensic readiness for SaaS security model? What are the steps to implement the forensic readiness, and what are the benefits behind it from security and business points of view?
Yeah, thank you for starting with me, first of all. It's a very interesting question. Obviously, the forensics and cybersecurity, we forgot about it, I have to say. Today, they are going into separate directions. They are doing great jobs in terms of research, but we forgot that they are actually complementary. Imagine your house. You lock your house. You have the keys for your house. You close your windows and everything. Why do you do that? That's a security. You don't want people to go into your house. But unfortunately, people, thefts, whatever, they go into your house. Then the question then, it's not the security. They break the security. The next thing is, how can I find out who gone into my house? And that's where the forensic part starts from there. So in the real life, we don't think like that as forensic and security. But in the world of computer science and mainly computers, that's what we call forensics. So these two, they are actually complementary, and we should start. I think, there are already systems, operating systems, for example, where you have the security and they provide some sort of forensics in order to find out a little bit more. I think the new systems, and mainly in the big systems, we have to have that. Why? Because if an incident happened, we cannot stop everything and do the forensics as the old days. Because what we do now is the forensics, when an incident happens, we take the machines, we take the equipment, what we call the resources, we start to analyze that. Well, in the meantime, the customers and, the businesses are closed. We don't want to do that. And mainly in the area of internet and the online services and so on, such as cloud computing, you cannot stop that. So the idea then is to bring what we call the forensic ready. Make sure that it's like you have your security camera coming into your house. If somebody gets in, you can capture who. So the same thing we can do as an analogy in the computers, where we bring the forensics ready. It means if there is anything, we can only go to the forensic ready, the information is registered, go there and investigate it. Now, you can tell me it's easy to say than done. Yes, you are right. We have to build those systems. Those systems, they are at the research area now for the last 10 years, I have to say. If you ask my opinion, I think they are ready to be on the product. But I would like to see the adoption of the private companies into this a new era and the new systems. So that's the idea. Yes, the research is done. It's nearly there. I think we need to get a feedback from the industry.
Thank you very much, Professor Tahar. Okay, we can move to Mr. AbdulRahman. As we know that the SaaS Service Level Agreement, SLA, is a document that outlines the agreement and plan between the company and its customers. What do you think about the importance of that SaaS SLA documents, terms and conditions document? And how do you describe the journey of preparing these documents, and what are the responsibilities for each party?
Thank you. The SLA, or the Service Level Agreement, is a contractual document between two parties, service provider and the customer. Usually service providers have this template, the standard template that they use usually with all their customers. We know that partnerships are unique. Every organization has its own objective, requirements, compliance. So the standard template will not work with any enterprise. So this template should be revised, should be, all objectives of each party should be met. All stakeholders should be taken into consideration when reviewing the SLA.
Yes.
I mean, the IT, the cybersecurity business unit, the legal business unit, from both parties, from the provider side and from the customer side. You want to check stuff like the uptime, for example. How much downtime can I take as a consumer, and what can the provider support me? Also, there are stuff like the support. What kind of support can they give me? And what are the terms and conditions of this support? Is it just like a standard support, or it is a premium support? And in case this support is not met, what is the escalation part to do here? So there are so many terms to be taken into consideration. I think that the document should be rewritten with details enough to cover everything, every requirement for the customer and for the provider.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Well said. Moving to Mr. Ricoh, we want to build over the previous discussion by talking about the ransomware negotiation. From your experience by being a CEO in an incident response firm, we would like to know, how does your firm ransomware negotiation interact with the incident response process, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question. So when we talk about incident response, and more specifically ransomware negotiation, speaking to what the gentleman said earlier, forensic artifacts are going to be one of the most critical parts during an investigation, a proactive, responsive incident, right? Without logs, without the technical detail, without medical metadata, without any sort of EBTX logs, or getting super technical there, we can't do much. So it's paramount, not only from a forensics perspective, that we capture those metadata points, right? But furthermore, we talk about SLAs. We have to ensure those SLAs are mitigated and also addressed within there, and also saying, hey, we're going to go ahead and capture those data points, and here's why, and here's our turnaround time on those. If we accumulate those specific things, at that point, we would actually have a good response right there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, as we know that security is an important aspect for SaaS, Engineer Abdullah, my question is, how to choose the right SaaS without compromising the security, and how to ensure security for the SaaS application?
All right, that's great. That's a great question. When it comes to choosing the SaaS, you have to understand as an organization, what exactly are you looking for? The business team, all stakeholders have to be there, including the cybersecurity. So you have a well-defined project plan on how you will be bringing in the vendor. And before bringing the vendor, the company should also have contract and vendor management. Mr. AbdulRahman brought an excellent point when it came to an SLA. Know what's yours and know what's on their hand, right? So both parties have to agree, you're responsible for this, I'm responsible for this. If an incident was to happen, what's our priorities, what's our responsibilities, what's your responsibilities?
Exactly.
A risk assessment has to be conducted before, during, and mitigated. And this is something that's ongoing with the SaaS provider. Lots of organizations nowadays, when they go with any cloud provider, not only SaaS or software as a service, when they go with any cloud provider, it's basically your infrastructure, but it's somewhere else. Yeah. So it's not like you're in cloud, you're safe. There's lots of cloud providers. You have to know what their defense mechanisms are. You have to know which type of precautions they're taking. Are they conducting penetration tests? Do they have the right security infrastructure? So you have to have policies in between you and the other party that you're dealing with. Because not all providers are the same. Mr. Abdulrahman also made an excellent note when he said it has to be customized, the SLA. Don't take the standards that's provided to X and Y company. Even for the policies that's being developed, lots of companies outsource their policies, procedures, and standards to a third party. And you'll be surprised, most companies receive policies that's for banks while they work for the insurance. My risks are different than their risks, right? So everything has to be customized for the organization itself. Conduct the risk assessments, be proactive. It's a matter of time till you are hacked. So it's how you defend and the layers of defense that you use to help prevent a cyber attack from occurring.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Well said. Okay, I saw that Mr. Glen is joining us online. Mr. Glen.
Good afternoon, Lama. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
How are you, Mr. Glen? Can you introduce yourself? A brief background about yourself for the audience.
Sorry, beg your pardon?
Can you introduce yourself for the audience? A brief background about yourself?
Sure, certainly. Hi. So my name is Glen Thomas. I'm the head of technology and cybersecurity advisory services at Grant Thornton in the UAE. I look after both technology transformation and cybersecurity projects and transformation projects as they're delivered throughout not only the UAE but through the broader GCC as well. My previous experience includes having my own businesses in professional services, data and text mining, and also biometrics in the financial sector. So a pleasure to be here and look forward to this panel and talking about some very interesting topics that we've already discussed today.
Thank you. Our pleasure to join us. So, Mr. Glen, we want to talk about SaaS security environments and its need to be synergetic with the wider business strategy. What are the best practices for that from your wide experience, and what is the most important elements that should be taken into consideration to achieve the desired value?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Lama. Thank you for the question. I think some of the have actually been touched on by the panel today, but what I wanted to sort of identify and highlight for people that on average, organizations use 16 SaaS applications to run their day-to-day business already. And for those organizations not yet in that space, and for those that already are, the need to strategically link the SaaS adoption strategy to the wider business strategy is essential and manifold. Certainly, a cloud-first approach for an entity will provide an easier pathway for further adoption of SaaS applications. However, organizations that are not taking this approach or perhaps still on this journey need to really closely interact with the business and to be able to demonstrate the benefits and ensure cohesion is required. So, for example, the things that come to mind for me as really key and strategic points is the budget area. You know, organizations largely still rely on budgets for software and applications on an annual or potentially on every 2 years, where, as we all know, potentially SaaS applications can be a monthly concern, and they can vary in cost and price based on the number of users and or data that is being managed through that particular application. Of course, we need to interact with the IT, not just for the old age conversation about on-prem versus cloud SaaS models, but also, and who's responsible for those new applications, but also for the onboarding and offboarding, any integration, expansion of the SaaS applications, and the data retention and retention of data that might be managed by that particular provider. And 66% of organizations say security is their major concern when adopting cloud-based applications or services. So not only do we have to interact with the IT security people, but we need to interact with the C-suite organisation, the C-suite, to assuage their concerns as well. So ultimately, any planning to adopt more or new SaaS applications needs to not be done in isolation, but in early and regular in engagement with the business and the wider business as a whole.
Great, thank you very much. Return back to Professor Tahar. Data privacy is a major concern. My question is how to ensure SaaS data privacy during the life cycle and the analysis of the data. And what do you think about the insider threats and how to prevent them?
I mean, this is really something we started taking the old science, we started to model using just the old recipes, but we forgot actually to look at what's the right definition of the data. Today, the data has a soul. We forgot about that. It has a soul. It means it has a life. And within the life, we need to make sure, it grows small and it becomes an adult. From adult, it becomes older and it dies one day. We need to follow that process because we are the people who basically that data represent, and it should be follow that process. We forgot to factor this into account, and that's where it becomes into, you are asking me about the privacy, about the steps. I think we need to look into the steps of human because this data has a soul. The soul of the data is human. We don't know how to define the soul of a person, but that's the thing. We need to define that. We need from the beginning when the data was born, we need to decide what it is. Private, give it, who is the owner? We forgot about that. We forget about something very, very simple. You go to the doctor, your doctor, and you pay the prescription, you pay the visit. That data, who owns the data? You never get back that data. The doctor will keep it in his cabinet, right? That's the data. You should give it to you. That's why I said, because it has a soul, the soul is you. Oh, you own it. You decide what it is, and it grows. It grows. One day it should die because it should have a limited memory within life, and the life cycle should be defined properly. So if you ask me about research, very little has been done in that area. If you ask me about business, we try to tweak things, right? With SLAs, you're talking about simple, the service legal agreements and things like that. I agree, but that's only what we call stitches, right? We need to review fundamentally because the big data is coming. It will govern the whole world. We need to think it properly.
Thank you very much. Building on top of what Mr. Tahar said, Engineer Abdullah, from your experience, what are the risks associated with SaaS and how we can ensure our data to be secured?
Well, the risks associated with SaaS, there's numerous amounts of risk. You're talking about the vendor themselves, the risks that you could have with the vendor themselves, and how they're analyzing your data. Because obviously who owns, as Professor Tahar has stated, who owns this type of data? So vendors that have SaaS, right, services, they're collecting data from governmental sectors. And I remember a story of an incident that occurred in Japan where data of governmental agencies was leaked because they were using a SaaS service. Hackers now are targeting SaaS service providers because they know through the SaaS, lots of organizations, whether it's commercial, whether it's business, whether it's governmental sectors, they're using these type of services because it's convenient. So you really have to use this SaaS provider. You have to understand that. And the risks of data leakage and how the security measures that they are taking, is it appropriate? Is it fit to secure your data? Data leakage was one of the other things. Access control, implementing multi-factor authentication. Also, as the gentlemen have stated, insider threats. Lots and lots of numerous risks when it comes to even financial risks. For instance, you run today, you get a subscription for a year. Second year, they raise their prices, right? Because your services is with them. And you tell them, hey, I want to cancel my services with you. I want to move to another company, right? This is another risk. How would data migration work? Because usually with these service providers, They try to stick with you for the long term. They don't want you to leave after a year or two. They make it a bit tough for you to migrate to another SaaS provider, right? So you should take all these precautions in the beginning of the contract, in the beginning before signing the contract. And this is why I always say risk is key. Why? Risk is before something that happens, right? So identify your risks, review every single document properly, ensure your team is ready, conduct the business required documentation, review the service solution design documentation, take the necessary steps onto ensuring a successful project. Lots of organizations, they go with SaaS providers, and then after they sign, they figure out that it's not something that we wanted. Now we have to create APIs, and this creates numerous amounts of risk. So it keeps on going. But if you're well defined in the beginning and you know what exactly you're looking for, and you have your stakeholders and your business team along with you during the journey in the cybersecurity and the internal control departments, because regulatories are another factor. Where the data is being stored, how is it being processed? In Saudi Arabia, for instance, we can't use cloud services that are outside the kingdom unless we have a specific approval through it, right? So all these precautions have to be taken in, not after you sign. It has to be before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. AbdulRahman, building on top what Engineer Abdullah and Professor Tahar said about the security and data privacy, we would like to hear from you how and where data is actually stored, and how it's being encrypted, and how to ensure its security.
Once your data is on the cloud, it is not under your control anymore. So you have to make sure about so many things. Number one, where is the data stored? Is it inside or outside the country to meet some regulations? Some providers will tell you it's inside, but they will do some processing outside the country, which may violate some local regulations. So we have to make sure about these things. We go back again to the SLA. So these things should be pointed out in the SLA. Stuff like the location of the data, and are there any providers or any third parties who will be involved in serving our data, doing any like processing it somewhere else. And believe me, this happens a lot. Make sure to check that with your provider. Make sure that everything is clear, full transparency is achieved. Number two, is the data segregated from other customers? Since the provider is using the shared model, so many tenants on the same hardware. So is there any policy or any technical controls taken so that no data leakage between customer will happen? Another thing is the security of our own data. What are the security measures? Providers will tell you that we have this and that, we are secure stuff. Do you have a security program that will guarantee the security of my data? Do you have defined process, policies, something that I can see and read and make sure that my data is really safe? Another thing, when the contractor expire or finish or ended, what will happen to the data for any reason? Is it going to be returned is it going to be securely wiped from the provider machines, from the infrastructure, or there's still some data that will still there even when my contract is finished? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. When moving to a third-party SaaS model, Mr. Glen, what do we need to think about in regards to third-party risk when moving to a SaaS model, and how to manage the risks from your wide experience?
Thanks, Lama. Some really good points that go to this particular response have already been mentioned by the last couple of speakers as well. You know, the risk assessment process and data security, but I'll jump onto that a little bit further on. I think back to the keynote speech that I gave yesterday about reputation of an organisation after a cyber attack. And what was really interesting was 2 points. 59% of organisations, as a result of, I think it was a Pinamon survey, suggested that they contracted with a third-party provider because of their reputation. They had not done any due diligence on that organisation. Just because they had a good reputation, they went with them. But I also reflect back to a couple of examples that I gave yesterday where there were significant breaches of an organisation. And two of the examples that I gave, well, I think maybe half the examples that I gave, the breach was a result of a third-party provider losing in that data breach and exposing information from that organisation. So there was a huge Instagram, Facebook the data breach that was result of a social arcs organisation that was in their supply chain. There was another one through VW and Audi. So what we really need to be cognizant of, as both engineer Abdullah has mentioned, as well as Mr. AbdulRahman there, is that we need to do risk assessment and we need to fully understand the constraints of the organisation and what we want to apply to that organisation when we're interacting with them. We live in a very dynamic world, and certainly, you know, as a result of the events over the last couple of years, the adoption of SaaS models, applications has exploded, but not necessarily has our interaction or our due diligence on those third-party providers kept pace with that explosion. And I think for me, as a person who uses SaaS applications, or even advising people when they use SaaS applications, I would really love to know about their data storage. As we heard about already, where are they keeping their data? How are they accessing? Who is accessing it? Who is able to destroy it? How are you going to transfer it back to me if I move to another provider? Also like to know what their DevSecOps is. You know, what security they actually have within their own application that is ensuring that no breach will occur, or if it does occur, it's mitigated and minimised. And to me, I think this is a key part of getting some form of peace of mind when I'm using a SaaS application. But I also feel that, you know, regular audit of all of your SaaS applications providers and your strategy is really key to ensure that you retain some modicum of control of your data and your interaction with those third-party providers, and you are aware and can take quick action should a breach or an incident occur.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Glen. Mr. Ricoh, after hearing from the esteemed colleagues about the threats and risks, we want to end this panel by hearing from you, how is the firm better prepared for incident response, and how, from your wide experience, what are the best practices in this domain?
So that's a really good question. All these speakers have provided great information with regards to SaaS and SaaS application, third-party risk. Something I noticed, remember, we come in the 11th hour when either it's about to go bad or it has gone bad. And what we notice is that a lot of these SaaS and SaaS applications, let's just take like your SIM or whatever, they're not being fine-tuned and nobody pays attention. They think they set it and forget it. In reality, the situation is you should be sitting down with your SIM content tuning team or a tuning team of some sort and actually pay attention and do those audits, right? I believe the gentleman next to me said, do the audits. The next question is, if you have an API falling into you, falling into your environment, what are you doing monitoring? Are you actively monitoring those dudes? And then what you want to do is kind of marry those against a framework, let's just say a modern attack framework, or better yet, the most recent threat actor tactics, TTPs, and IOCs. And the reason we want to do that is to make sure our SIM content tuning team or our tune is actually capturing the most recent relevant things that are into our environment. What might be important to me in my environment might not be important to you. So we have to tune those things to make sure we're capturing a holistic perspective of a picture.
Thank you very much. You would like to add, please?
Yes, if I may add to Mr.
Yes,
Ricoh,
please.
I completely agree with you. And I've noticed lots of organizations, they bring in top-of-the-line SIM solutions from top providers, but they don't fine-tune it. And they don't have the right use cases for their organizations. And it's when it's too late, as he stated, then they contact third parties for incident response, come help us, save us. And then the third parties, they have to come in and fine-tune their SIM solution, try to get the data out, then try to solve it. So I completely agree with Mr. Ricoh and what he has stated.
Also, Professor Tahar would like to add, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, just one thing. It's not related. I agree completely. By the way, there is one thing. You asked me a question. Actually, I forgot about addressing it. It's the insider threats. Bear in mind the privacy breaches they are coming from the inside by 40%. 40% of the crimes and privacy breaches came from the inside. So whatever the SLAs you do, whatever things, they are coming from the inside. There is a problem, how to deal with that. That's extremely difficult. Yeah, I mean, it's a culture, it's a training, there is no recipe for that, unfortunately, because you are hurt from the inside, not from the outside. Usually we try to protect from yourself from outside, it's coming from the inside.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much. Thank you, our experts here today, Professor Tahar, Mr. AbdulRahman, Mr. Ricoh, and Engineer Abdullah, and Mr. Glen, who's joining us online. Thank you, everyone, for your conductive contribution and fruitful discussion. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I just want to check if there's any questions you can ask the speakers. Is there any questions? Thank you all. Thanks. Oh, sorry. There's a question? Yeah. We can do some questions. Yeah. Yes, please. You can go back again, please.
Hi, hello. My name is Anastasia Gariu,
Yeah.
and I'm a PhD candidate at Sensor Systems and Internet of Things Lab at Carleton University. I have a question regarding security policies and the selection and adaptation of security policies with respect to the environment. So how easy it is to change and reconfigure security policies if we're talking, for example, about the Internet of Things systems and sensor devices. And is this actually possible to do it without the interruption of the system operation?
So I think the question...
Yes, Mr. Ricoh, if you want to answer, but Mr. AbdulRahman was asking if she can repeat her question so they can fully understand.
Yes, sure. So if we're talking about the Internet of Things system, so many devices interconnected together, in many cases in IoT, the security policies are changing with time with respect to the changes of the environment. So how easy it can be to reconfigure the security policies of the system and adapt it to the environment without the interruption of the system operation?
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. So when it comes to indicators of compromise, right, and we have to, let's just say we have to block those, do a port block or a process block or a PID block or something like that, doing those things, you have to measure the risk of the impact of business. If you're going to block down port 443 and you do that just like that, I promise you that most of your stuff is not going to work, right? That's going to be a hard problem. So what I would do is actually confirm and verify first with the business. You can do a pseudo isolation from within your network, anything like that. But just remember this, there is a change management process. If you have a huge organization like 30,000 servers, you should never be knee-jerk reacting any type of change management. Okay, you need to get with your business, your infrastructure team, your development team, right? If you're a small firm and you're more lean and nimble, you can definitely do those things. But just remember, any change that you do will have a negative or positive consequence. It's just the nature of the beast. So I would kind of roll it back just a little bit. If you have an indicator compromise, if you have a TTP and you have a known threat actor, you probably need to make a decision fast, and those are called emergency changes. And you can change the policies.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tahar, please.
I think you're talking about Internet of Things, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, just to add to my colleague here, usually these devices they have a very, small, efficient in what they are doing, but they cannot do everything. One way of doing this, and one way of implementing a good solution is to limit their scope, what they can do, what they cannot do. Because you are in a heterogeneous environment in terms of security. If a breach happened, at least you limit the damage. And that's the advice I can give you. limit the scope of each of your components so that you cannot spread, the attack to all your system.
Thank you very much, Mr. AbdulRahman.
I can't stress enough what said about the change management. Otherwise, we'll end up doing so many unmanaged changes that will result in some bad stuff. So change management is key here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
I'm here all day, everybody.
Thank you.
So
Any
any
other
other
questions,
questions? No?
So thank you very
Okay,
much. Thank you
thank
for your time and your words. It was very fruitful, and I think everyone has enjoyed it. Thank you very much.